Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lunchzone. I am Nathan Humple. I am a metadata librarian here at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
And I'm Matthew Carricker, first year PhD student in the anthropology department here.
And I'm, with a poor voice right now, Thomas Malaby, professor of anthropology here at UWM and off screen.
Good, and we acknowledge that in Milwaukee we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present.
Okay, thank you. So today we are playing Hades. Thomas was very excited about it, so I expect him to talk throughout the entire show. We're starting a new game. We may switch to my game where I have a few more items, but let's start with this game.
You know, the amazing thing about this game, I think, is every part of it is just carefully crafted. You know, the art, the narrative structure of all the different stories that you can engage with the different characters, the characterizations themselves, the voice acting, and then, of course, the procedural stuff, too. Is all just really, really well done. I find myself not eager to master the game. I just want to keep playing it, you know, just to see what else comes up. And not just what comes up in any given room, but, you know, what new way of handling a weapon, new way of charging, you know, powering up a weapon, you know, as you can outside of the procedurality. You know, how would that feel? I mean, even the weapon structure itself, that there are these, 6 different weapons, creates enormous replayability and depth to the game.
Yeah, as I go along, I'm not that far into it, but I'm far enough into it that most other roguelikes probably would have run out of at least new things for you to start with. But there's always something new, some new tweak you can use for the weapon or something. You know, it really, I think maybe what's kind of unusual about this is that it really expects you to start over again and again and again. And because it does, it gives you gives you more and more when you start.
Yeah. And there's such a well-evoked sense of the intrigue amongst all these, you know, mythological figures. You know, they're so well researched to give a sense of the fact that, you know, Theseus is kind of a jerk that nobody likes, you know, except the Minotaur, and you know, all the Patroclus and Achilles, or all these different, pretty subtle and subtly rendered and explored, you know, famous figures, which so often get reduced to one kind of treatment of their mythological purview or domain or another.
But still written in a style that is modern, but not annoyingly so, you know.
Right.
Ooh. I swear I'm better than this.
It's always different on stream.
That's true.
And I think it's also, your play suffers when you start a game with a character that doesn't have the buffs, the permanent buffs that you may have invested in.
I've gotten used to.
Yeah, gotten used to the extra power.
Yeah, the way that Ren was talking about this game, it sounds like there's a real sort of difficulty aspect to it, which the gameplay is hard. You need to master it.
Yeah. A lot of subtlety. And the thing is, I think, is a big source of the richness. Is that the way the boons, are unique. There's a unique array of boons that you acquire in any run of the game. And because those boons will so heavily shape what your effective play style is, you don't actually get to accumulate in anything like a linear way the greater and greater ability with, say, the sword. Right?
Yeah, that's true. I haven't played with the sword in forever.
Yeah, and even if you picked just one weapon and only played with that weapon, because you can't count on getting the same boons every time.
That's true.
You don't get to sort of say, well, I'm mostly using the dash strike. That's my bread and butter. Well, it doesn't get to be if you don't get the same boons or boon options that would allow you to power that up in an effective way. Or if you did, it might mean you're turning down some boons that are just so crazy effective.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you take them? And then you have to adjust your play style to meet them. I said I wasn't going to talk, and I'm very glad that I'm living up to that promise.
So Matthew, you're not as familiar with this game.
No, I've never seen it before. In fact, when you guys were talking about it, I was imagining a photorealistic, maybe like over-the-shoulder camera kind of game.
Yeah.
Whereas this isometric drawn dungeon crawler, is actually a pleasant surprise.
I love isometric. I love it. It's maybe my favorite viewpoint for computer games.
Like 2.5D.
Yeah, exactly. I think back to all those great arcade games that started to use 2.5D and how much I enjoyed those. I think one of the first ones was actually with a ship. Do you remember that one? It was like almost looked like the space shuttle moving through these different rooms. I mean, this is a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe research that.
Yeah, I associate 2.5D with real-time strategy games.
Oh,
yeah,
sure, yeah.
Warcraft.
Well, yeah, Age of Empires.
Yeah. Yeah. Civ.
Yeah, Relics, Company of Heroes as well. Although that was actually Force 2.5 in a 3D environment, which you could sort of move around by holding down the Alt key and stuff.
And turn-based strategy too, not just real time. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think what Civ is turn-based, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting. Is that 2.5D?
I think Civ is.
Yeah, it is because you can't rotate.
You can't really rotate. Yeah.
Well, that's, the fact that you can't rotate, which sometimes you take for granted in games now, makes the level design, I would assume, makes designing for it a lot different. Well, potentially easier, but not, because you have to make sure that you're not going to get confused with this viewpoint when the other one you can take an assumption that there's...
That they're going to, if they have to move to see that, then they have to move to see that kind of idea, right? Oh, interesting. You got an epic.
Yeah.
Eric Kirsting makes a similar point in his recent review of Resident Evil: The Village, looking at the different camera angles in the series and the way that the forced scene camera angle of early Resident Evil games forces viewpoint and which overlaps with tension and jump scares especially, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't sort of like metagame with the camera to look around corners and such, because when you go around the corner it flips to a different fixed camera angle. And by looking at games where camera choices are very constrained, you can sort of
build tension.
It's a phrase of Arturo Escobar. You can deconceal or unconceal the design choices which otherwise would be concealed, which we would take for granted in that kind of way,
Oh, I need to read that, because that reminds me of some of the stuff I'm talking about in
hypermediacy.
Natural.
Yeah.
That's a book, right?
Designs for the Pluriverse.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that could have been a chapter. But,
just like Sally said about Outline of a Theory of Practice.
Right, yeah,
This book should have been an article.
There's a couple of main beats that just keep coming back and again, But good for him for having a good book deal.
He always has smart ideas too.
But the idea is that we make these ontological commitments,
Yeah.
especially, and the more neutral seeming the choice, the more ontologically committed it is, of course.
Yeah.
So we need to develop a way to deconceal the ways in which we naturalize certain choices, especially in, for him, design, and for us talking about this, the design of video games.
Right.
In the way that with hypomediacy, let me see if I can get this right.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ways in which you're hiding
Yeah.
the use of forms
Yeah.
in order to order a certain reality claim.
Yeah. Yeah. To make it more natural and legitimate.
Right, yeah.
Because it has less apparent contrivance.
Mm-hmm.
So was that the very first run, the one we just watched?
Yeah. And so it's interesting because the first run you're just dropped into it.
Yeah.
And
you don't get to see this part.
Right, and this gets more and more elaborate as it goes on.
Yeah.
Are we in a merchant?
Yeah, you only have the sword right now.
Yeah, I'm just trying.
You could
How many
unlock
do I have?
the bow.
Oh, I have 2. Okay, so I'll unlock this one.
The the fists are surprisingly fun.
Yes, they are.
Skelly. Too bad you don't have some nectar.
These permanent spaces are always interested in procedurally generated roguelikes. It's a trope. The merchant,
Yeah.
in the
Yes.
dungeon or whatever that you find. I was looking at that Crypt of the Necrodancer, and that's a procedurally generated dungeon crawl. But on every layer or in every dungeon, there's hidden a merchant's room.
Yeah. I like the if you get boons with the arrow, you power up your special. It can be the best thing to use close to an enemy.
Oh, interesting.
Because you get you can make contact with 5 arrows in one enemy, and you get certain multipliers. It's that if the more arrows hit an enemy, the more damage they take.
So this is a punching bag with dialogue.
Yes.
You can, because there's so many different options for how to play.
He's your sparring partner, and he really wants you to get good.
Oh, I
He's
see.
like, beat me up. Come on.
All right.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
I can't remember. Sorry.
It's interesting how roguelikes sort of justify their shifting landscape. This one just takes it for granted that that Hades doesn't stay the same, and so when you're trying to escape, you have to navigate it a different way every time you go out there.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, because otherwise people could escape. But
Right.
all right, let's see.
So are you the son of Hades?
Yes, and this is a new creation for this game.
Sure. It's like, what if Hercules was the son of Hades? But he belongs on Olympus.
Well, that's what the other gods are saying, because they don't really particularly care for Hades. And I suspect that...
One of the things, by the way, just parenthetically, one of the little touches I love about this game is that he responds to the voiceover.
Yes, that's true, yeah.
To the voiceover, which is great.
Which kind of suggests something that, he is the voiceover, or at least in part that's part of him.
Yeah, right. Is it his internal monologue?
Mm-hmm.
Or,
And it doesn't come up all that often, but it does come up, so there's different tropes at play in the narrative. There's a lot of different tropes at play in this narrative.
Reminds me of Master Chief in the Halo series. One of these sort of like silent action figures, but because he's got Cortana, they have this internal monologue. It's also exposition because she's an advanced artificial intelligence.
all right. Remember, your special will take out more than one of them at a time.
Oh,
behind
I
your cast
forgot
too.
about that. What is my... Do I have... Does
Your
my
cast
special...
is really good in here. Hmm?
Does my special have a cooldown, or...
No,
It, no?
no. The special attack is just the volley, and it's the Y at the top one probably. I haven't. It's the one that'll shoot out 5 arrows at a time in an arc.
So you're playing this on the Switch?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Which button do you have that map to on that?
I don't know. I thought... Did you... Are you... Are you playing it on a Switch, or what are you
Yeah, I'm
playing?
playing on a Switch. So it's the Y button on the Switch is the top of the grid.
Oh, that...
That
Okay.
one. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Oh, I forgot
And
about
you can
that.
power it up, and it's really good when you power it up.
Because I was using... So this is the normal shot.
Right, and then there's
And then
the
I have a
cast.
special move, and that I think has a cooldown, or I need
Right,
to...
the cast has a cooldown. There are different ways to set up the cast. The default that you have right now, you'd have to buff it to do it differently, is that you can only do it once. That's the red diamond in the bottom.
Oh, I see it.
You can get multiple ones, different ways. And then there's 2 ways to structure it. One is that you throw it on an enemy. You throw any red diamond you have on an enemy, and
right.
it sits on them until you've done enough damage that
Okay.
it falls off. But the other way you can buff it is that you just get a diamond back after a certain cooldown period. So you can buff it to a cooldown. Yeah, your volley stops attacks too, which is nice.
Oh, that's right. And these guys have sort of a shield right now.
Yeah, that's
As
the
you-
yellow that's around them. The shield break is also something you can buff with boons, so that certain kinds of attacks are extra powerful against shields. So now that the shield is broken, you're going to do a lot more damage. Yeah, the bow is really nice. I find myself always enjoying it. But there are certain enemies that it's just not as good against depending on what boons you have.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I like that one where I can use the special close-up, because the bow is generally speaking great at range.
Yes.
But if you've got that buff, then it's okay to be next to somebody.
Did you ever play as the elf in Gauntlet?
Yes, but I didn't usually. I usually played the... what did I usually play? I think I usually played the wizard.
Right, yeah.
Which is strange because I'm mostly a tank in team fantasy type play,
Uh-huh.
like World of Warcraft and stuff like that.
Right, yeah. Well, the wizard in Gauntlet has such button mashing casting kind of thing.
Yeah,
That it can feel like you're very offensive. It's a very sort of militant wizard.
yeah. I like how you can see in Gauntlet this kind of, with our eyes today, a kind of confusion about class and race,
How so? How so?
Well, because the elf is a ranger, they
Oh,
would
yeah.
say now, right? But they're classified according to their race, whereas the wizard gets to be classified according to their class.
Right, I
Oh,
see.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
I think
Yeah,
that's
so the
simplification,
suggestion-
because the race for Gauntlet, which is pretty just action-oriented, doesn't really matter.
Well, but there's an ontology behind it. There's a
Yeah.
classification system behind it that suggests elves are only this,
Mm-hmm.
whereas, a human can choose to be a wizard, or they can choose to be this or that.
Right.
And then there's Valkyrie, right?
Yeah, Valkyrie, which
and what
is...
kind of, was it a melee DPS, or who's the Valkyrie?
Well, I always thought of Valkyrie as a kind of, like a dex-based fighter.
Yeah.
Or like an,
Like a rogue,
an
maybe?
alternative fighter. Yeah.
Yeah.
because I don't think Gauntlet has a rogue. Or does it?
I don't think it does. Who
It
is
has
the tank?
fighter, ranger, fighter, or
Yeah.
warrior, whatever. Fighter,
Warrior, right.
Fighter, wizard,
Yeah, so
archer.
Valkyrie is
Valk-
melee DPS,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
In World of Warcraft terms.
What's that damage per second?
Yeah.
It's interesting that as the game progresses, you get these encouragements to interact with the people of the dungeon.
Yeah.
To find out more about them or whatever.
Yeah, and the book trope, records that development, so you can see it measured as, oh, I guess I am learning more about, whoever.
Now, who gives you that? I'm trying to remember.
It got Achilles, I think. It's his book. So you got to talk to him in the main chamber.
You guys familiar with the term dungeon ecology?
I can know what it would mean. Who's
It's just
used
sort
it?
of, well, I don't know. It just comes up in like the angry DM.
Oh yeah, sure.
Talks about it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's this sort of like almost like mythical marriage between the dungeon, which is a game space that where you work with the mechanics you have as a character in order to win an encounter or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a space which leans into the affordances that you have as a character, right? So that it's where your abilities meet challenge. That's what the dungeon is.
Yeah.
But then dungeon ecology is this sort of idea that, okay, well, at the same time, what questions are created out of the dungeon? Like, okay, so
I
this.
generally, by the way, sorry, I generally don't think these are good deals.
No, they're not. But I'm at a point in the game where it doesn't really matter, because
Right.
I'm not gonna finish the.
The run.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to take the boss option.
Is this the?
The little skull on the bottom of that
Oh,
thing
that's
tells you that
right.
this is going to be a boss fight. Sorry, what were you saying about ecology?
Right, it's this marriage between the mechanics of a dungeon, that
Yeah.
it's, a place where you play the game, but then the ecology is like, okay, well, if you've got goblins in this room and kobolds in that room, then what is the larger story going
Right.
on here? How do you make sense of the fact that there's always a merchant in this room in the dungeon? Like, what's his like? What does he get up to? And if the players ask him, what are you going to say about that? And
Yeah.
so ecology is sort of the promise that everything adds up.
And I think when I read that too, I think it's not just narrative-wise, although I think that's absolutely part of it. But it's also stuff like, wait, how does this work? Are there people patrolling,
Right, yeah.
Where are people getting their food, why are the rats picking there to live? Is there some access to a food source, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a helpful way to think about when you're a DM designing dungeons, because everything isn't reducible. I mean, you could try, but I don't think everything's reducible to narrative, strictly speaking. It's also just a kind of rhythm of practice, that makes sense and isn't just a good story.
And ultimately, the reason I call it a myth is because it's this sort of idea that the dungeon master should know all of this, but of course they could never know everything that is going to be relevant to the game,
Right.
because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So what is actually the optimum disposition to take towards that indeterminacy?
Yeah.
If they never need to know about where the goblins are getting the food from, you don't need to spend time actually thinking about it.
Right.
know.
Okay, interesting. You're getting lots of epics on this.
Yeah.
I just thought about that because before you came in here, you had this sort of almost like an urban setting where you got all these ghosts walking about, and it's like,
Yeah, right there.
what are they up to? What's
Right.
their story?
Yeah, and they are pretty faithful to the mythological understandings of these planes.
Yeah, they're
What
shades.
Elysium is supposed to be, and which souls went where, for what reason. And there's those little pinpoints of light that Nathan has looked at before. Hey, use your special against that thing, man.
Oh.
Against all of them, yeah. You can get a bunch of them at once. See, your special's more powerful now because of that
Nice.
last one that you got.
Oh, you're right.
The epic.
It
See,
inflicts
I
way
need to
too
pay
much
more
damage
attention to
you.
what I'm getting.
Yeah, it really makes a big difference. I mean, you're effectively getting to, from a limited range of options, pick a play style, and you have to find this accommodation, a negotiated arrangement between how you like to play or where you think your mechanical skills lie and what boons are available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think, obviously these dungeon crawlers,
And
or I
those
should
skull
say,
piles generate more skulls.
right, yeah.
Okay.
the roguelikes have to give you boons during the run. Otherwise, the run just becomes really dry.
Right.
And this one really is very generous with them.
Yeah.
But you're right, because of that, you really get to kind of define your playstyle. It's not helping.
There's discussions of online of people who they want to do this kind of game mastery kind of thing where they want to commit to this. I'm doing this with this weapon, with this style. And then they go in and they don't get the boons they want.
Yeah, yeah.
Or they'll re-roll. That is, they'll reload the game at the first entry point to start with a different boon. Or they'll choose different trinkets or get other buffs that will increase the percentages of getting boons from that god versus that god. Because different gods buff in different ways. Athena is about defense. Artemis is about criticals. Ares is about, overall attack damage. Dionysus is about debuffs, et cetera, et cetera.
Have you ever heard of a Nemesis error before?
Nemesis era? No.
Maybe it's just particular to Dwarf Fortress, but I bring it up because they're both procedurally generated, and you have this sort of thing about people re-rolling.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we used to find in Dwarf Fortress was the procedural generation of the world in which we had invested our time building this fortress would send things against us, or things would happen we didn't want to happen, and there was the temptation to just reload from the last save,
Yeah, right.
so that we could elicit some control over, that level of randomness. The Nemesis error was this sort of thing where the game file would corrupt if you did that too many times.
Oh.
And we sort of created it as this sort of moral thing. It's like, well, that's what you deserve, if you spurn the spirit of being thrown into this procedural generation like that, you're going to get an Nemesis error.
Right.
So I was wondering if that was a more general case, or
yeah, there's nothing like that here that I'm aware of.
it's almost like a deification of code sequencing.
Yeah, right,
really,
right.
Well, and I think one of the things that games that try to encode a moral system on is that you can pretty easily reload things when you see the consequences of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's always an issue that developers want to deal with, because they want people to feel the consequences of their decisions. And if you are able to reload it, once you find that a decision that isn't as what you wanted, then you don't have you don't live with those consequences. And I know The Witcher has always wanted to.
Here's one of those pinpoints of light I was talking about that gives you a narrative structure.
The Witcher, which attempted to circumvent that, the consequences of your decisions would always be much later in the game. So you would have to do 2 hours worth of replay if you didn't like that decision and the consequences of it. Yeah. But I do like this other idea, especially with roguelikes, where it's like, okay, you can reset it a few times, but if you do, then you're going to lose everything that you did.
The interesting thing about it is that I don't think it is a design feature of Dwarf Fortress. I think it's a bug.
Oh yeah,
which has been turned into, which has been interpreted morally, right? Via a certain disposition towards.
Yes. Right. There's process right there. Don't forget your cast.
Oh, that's right. Better you to know.
It's interesting what you say about The Witcher, though. I'm thinking about
Your special inflicts weak too.
Weak.
So she'll do less damage. I mean,
oh, I
she
see.
does a lot of damage, but it'll be less.
Like dialogue options, right? When you choose the nasty dialogue option in a game, and then you see instantly the effect.
Yeah.
But I like this idea of holding back on those effects,
right?
So that it's not so much within the immediate agency of the player to change the consequences of their action.
Yeah. it really complicates the narrative of the game, of course, and I think that's, you don't want to have to do it for every single dialogue choice where, that really makes things difficult when designing that narrative, I think. But, it also seems more realistic, I think, because it just makes it like...
For example, at the end of the Fallout games, it's amazing, by the way, that you're playing this successfully and having this discussion.
Nathan is incredible at that.
At the end of the Fallout games, they have that cinematic montage of from even like the early games, where it goes back and revisits all of your decisions.
Yeah. And you see what the consequences of it were, yeah.
You have your cast button.
Oh.
Now that you said about your chapter, I'm thinking about that Schaeflin article with the finding the pigs and stuff.
Yeah, right.
In the way that how do these games put us in a position to meet them halfway in order to put all of the pieces together?
Right. Just like you described with the Nemesis effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could write an article about that.
Perhaps, yeah.
Right. If you got the right opportunity in the right collection or something, it's a nice way to maybe bring Escobar's ideas and what I'm saying about the natural together, if you want.
Right, of course, yeah, totally. Within the realm of code as well.
Yeah, right.
And the
because that one takes you to the code in a very direct way, which is a lot harder with a lot of more emergent effects. Famously in World of Warcraft, there was the bug before one of the big dungeons. Naxxramas, I can't remember which one. No, it was the one with the dragon, I think, where the warlock's teleportation ability could be used through the locked gate.
Oh.
So you could get your party on the other side of it, even if you didn't have the key that you were supposed to have. Now, that's clearly a code problem, but to talk about it and explore it, you can't get as close to it as you can, I think, with Dwarf Fortress, because Dwarf Fortress is built to be so much closer to code logic and how the game works.
Yeah. Plus, since it's all coded by one individual.
Right. Yeah, it's easier to assign the agency and to get into a kind of analytic discussion about their position. And
totally.
Yeah. Very cool. So there's this interesting thing about the game too, Matthew, where you have all these opportunities to simply adjust and buff the decor. Just purely, ecology things. I mean, it's not just like the flooring and the curtains and stuff in different styles, but also to, provide a sofa over there where there wasn't a sofa. For a nice viewing point, or things like that.
And this is the space you go into between dungeons.
Yes. Yeah, so if we look here, you're not seeing all of them yet, but these are all the different areas along the top.
Oh, I see. Cool.
And the things that you can change. And you can, ecologically, here as well, you can pay money so that also in the dungeons you go through, in the levels you go through, the urns, some percentage of the urns, have gold pieces. Have warble or obol or whatever they call it.
So this is ultimately where you spend your loot.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, one of the ways. I mean.
Yeah, right. That's true. And also, here you can spend. And there's a bunch of other things. You bought that.
We were talking after you left last week about. I always find it funny when they try to explain in the world, in the diegesis, like why, or maybe they don't. Right? They try and explain it away. Why, for example, like a fish man coming out of a cave has 4 copper pieces on him when you kill him, right? Or a bear has, silver pieces on him when you kill him.
Yeah, exactly.
And Nathan said about how sometimes on the bear you find bear pelt, which you can then sell for money.
Actually, on this front, the ecology of this game might be more coherent, right? Because enemies, well, I guess you can buff it though, so enemies will sometimes drop essentially hit points.
Oh, right.
But I don't think do they drop items? They're in the urns, and you get them as rewards for the rooms. But I don't know if they ever drop obol, or something like coins, essentially.
I really don't like this. I don't think I'm very good with this weapon.
Oh, I like the shield a lot.
Shield frisbee.
The shield opens up some really cool boon options, especially from Athena. where you can just deflect all the time. I mean, think about against Meg in that last boss battle.
Yeah.
You can hold that, and you are completely protected during that special radiating attack. So there's certain things like that which are really great with the shield. And if you buff the special, you can hit more opponents, and it's faster, or you can still attack while it's happening.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
There's cool things you can do there. So I like the shield. Actually,
Is there a weapon that you don't like?
No, I don't like the sword very much.
Oh, yeah.
And the gun I've had mixed success with. I don't like the shield very much. So my favorite are the fists, the bow, and the shield, probably. And the gun, actually, gun can be really fun if you get the right boons for the gun.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
If you get increased range on the gun, if you get unlimited ammo on the gun, it just makes everything so easy. Again, I'm talking like I'm an expert on Hades. I mostly watch my kids play.
But that's a good position to be, because then you can actually see what's going on.
I can say I fought the final boss once. I didn't kill him. But that's a pretty far through the game to get there, so. And the mirror, the little
Scrying.
brazier thing that you put in, that tells you how many people you've killed, how many shades you've killed, and how many times you've tried to escape. It's very humbling, because eventually, I think I'm at 39 or something like that. And I'm like, wow, it took me 39 times to actually fight the big bad guy. Or at least the first version of the big bad guy.
Well, Celeste does that too. There's a number of games that give you those statistics. And Celeste, I mean, it tells you how many deaths you have, which were, I don't know, maybe in the thousands. I don't remember when I finally finished the game.
Remember, by the way, there's always a delay with traps.
Yeah, I know.
Especially when you get your double dash, which is a buff, you can jump in and out of traps, and then they'll activate on the enemies.
Right.
And there's actually boons where the traps will affect the enemies 500%.
Yeah, I saw that one last time.
Yeah, I don't go that route, but it is, it's available. I'm sorry, you're in the middle of saying something, Nathan.
I actually don't remember. But very interesting.
To your point about watching your kids play and beating the final boss, can liberal accounts of video games understand, getting your big brother to beat Bowser for you,
No, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, they insist on the unencumbered self to such a high degree that, they just are blind to all of that stuff. It's just like neoclassical economics is blind to all that stuff, because neoclassical economics is Lockean.
Mm-hmm.
Consort, what an interesting choice of verb there. Now, so this deflect is great. This is why Athena and the shield are great. And this one is really good.
Oh, yeah.
Because as you're moving around, you're much more protected.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets even better when you have double dash. See that? Now that doesn't just protect you, the deflect will damage the enemy's back, right? So, see that? They all took a lot of damage, right? It's great. Just, those guys are so low health, you can just dash around them. Because your dash now does damage and can deflect.
Oops.
That was straightforward.
Yeah, there wasn't that many in there.
I'm surprised you haven't gotten a nectar option on any of your rooms yet, in any of your runs we've seen today. It's interesting, too, the room design, they always start out, almost always with normal rooms, with a small sample of enemies. It's like a sample, Okay, here are the enemies you'll be working with in this room. You can try to do your first little clear of them, okay, let's try a couple more.
Yeah,
And then there's the third one, which is everybody. Of course, here you just get the two, but sometimes it really could. Oh, there's nectar.
It's the spinning plates, that comes with a lot of these games that have distinct enemy types.
Yeah.
And then how they work in consort with each other.
Right.
And then how you can master moving between them, because all of these individual elements But then the interesting thing is then how the game, when it puts these different enemies together, new tactics emerge, right? Not just for how the monsters work together, but how you then have to change how you play in order to win
Right,
them.
exactly.
We ever played Serious Sam? I don't think we have.
I don't think so.
Because that's a really interesting game, how each enemy type, you really have certain strategies to deal with. And the game gets more and more chaotic. It introduces them fairly slowly, but then you're dealing with all kinds of different ones and really have to switch your tactics on, very, very quickly in order to deal with the hordes of them.
So I have to ask you, who are you going to give your bottle of nectar to first?
I don't know. Oh yeah, that's what that's for. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's how you get trinkets. And a trinket is you have a collection of them. You can have one on at a time, and it gives you a permanent buff. And then you can swap them eventually between levels of hell. So
do you choose a god or a deity to give your nectar to?
Yeah, any character in the game pretty much you can give nectar to. The first time you do it, they will give you their trinket.
Oh, I see.
And they get jealous of each other. I don't know if it's because of the nectar that you give it.
Yeah, I don't think that the jealousy within any given run really only ever has a game effect, which is, if you accept you've got Athena and Dionysus, and then you get a choice between them, and you choose one, then the other will add a damaging effect in the next room. You get this,
That's
those are
right.
very, very hard rooms as far as I'm concerned.
But then
there's
there's
a nice little thing.
But then there's
One of my
chaos.
favorite characters. He has a great voice acting.
Fury sisters don't often leave me be. Where'd they go, anyway? And, what are you doing here?
Oh, just out on a little stroll is all. Do me a favor, though. You see the Fury sisters. Let them know I was headed down the way I came from, will you?
Oh, I'll let them know, all right. I hear you loud and clear, Your Highness. I'll just go about my business now, and you take care.
Yes.
Notice the boulder has a face too,
Oh,
and that becomes relevant later.
I can't tell if he's happy or not.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
He is a Zen figure in this. he is
As he needs to be.
yeah, exactly. There's a certain wisdom that's evident in how Sisyphus lives. And the Furies are those who are charged with torturing him. And you're fighting the Furies at the end of your first level of hell. One of them anyway. So there's a kind of subplot about that.
Whoops.
So, Reflect didn't quite catch that one, unfortunately.
Oops. I do like this aspect of the shield. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
There's really a lot going on in any given fight. I mean, you got to try getting behind enemies because backstabbing.
Yeah, and you can really buff backstabbing if you're that kind of really good situational awareness player. All right, Dionysus.
That's revelry. People having a good time. Well, sure then. In a day.
Oh, I gotta go. Sure. All right, thanks, guys. I enjoyed
Well, thank
it.
you.
Yeah, this was fun.
He's like a swinger from the 70s.
Yeah, he really is.
Ooh, by the way, strong drink is great early in the game. Because any fountain, including the ones between levels, will boost your damage up as well as restore all your HP.
Cool.
All right.
All right, we'll see you next week, maybe. I don't know what we'll play.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to come in next week, I think.
Okay.
We'll have to come up with a schedule.
Of course, yeah. Right, bye-bye.
Do you want to give it a try?
Okay, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Why don't we wait until the next round?
Yeah, sure. I was just about to have a little micro rant as a Scottish person.
Oh, okay.
How much it irritates me that the classical world is all fucking English accents. Like ancient Latins and ancient, Helens had accents and they weren't fucking from Cambridge, okay?
Yeah, it would be. I know it would be interesting to sort of play with those different accents and sort of, how the different analogs. I wouldn't know what they were, but like, the different analogs currently in our own political world to those different accents would be. But you're right; it's usually just.
Every fucking time. Television, films, games, there's a Roman or whatever. And then it's always like, okay, so who's going to have a... And then even like, they even go so far as to have like, okay, so the working class Latins have a Northern English accent. And the sort of, the members of the... I can't remember what anyway, the upper classes have the Southern English accent, and it's just like, get a fucking grip.
Well, and I think, it's interesting how Americans are the ones that really kind of perpetuate that.
Yeah, totally. And then you have, of course, in the fantasy world, it's always the elves have the classy English accents as well.
Yes, yeah. Is there any race or
Dwarves
have this? That's right. You're right.
I could predict what you were going to say.
What about Welsh? Do Welsh have an analog in fantasy or?
Well, you see, the thing good question. I don't think the Welsh accent gets a good whack actually, and maybe in sort of like your. I haven't seen Game of Thrones, so I can't comment upon it.
Oh, yeah.
I was also going to say, of course, I don't know how to engage with it, really critically now, but we've sort of internalized the idea that fantasy games, and then of course the games that come off of that, internalize the categories of race and class. In a way which both brings them close, but also elides. I don't know how to engage with it, but it's there.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're gonna engage with it, or if you're gonna do that in a game, you have to sort of play on some stereotypes. Otherwise, you can't recognize those analogs,
Totally.
and that becomes fairly problematic.
But those analogs, as you were saying about Americans, and as what the French call American culture, is that those analogs are perspectival and positioned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an analog which is felicitous to whom, where.
Yes,
right?
That's true. Get out of here.
Just thinking about what is Russell Crowe's accent in Gladiator. This is sort of like, like he's from fucking Hull or something. I don't know. And then Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. Then there's Kevin Costner and Robin Hood, the infamous non-English accent.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the exception that proves the rule, isn't it?
Felt a little pressure with Thomas here because he knows so much more about the game. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Thank you, mate.
You want to give him your nectar?
Sure. Let's see what happens.
Kieran, you've been such a reassuring sight. I thought I'd offer you a token of my gratitude. You'll have to give me something in return. It was a gift. Though you're insisting, aren't you?
Bone hourglass.
I find the use of mate in a lot of the dialogue a bit specious.
Hey there, Meg.
You're stubborn, are you? Maybe my whip might make you reconsider whatever it is that you're attempting here.
Your whip's not been all that persuasive in the past.
Maybe persistence will pay off for both of us. Come then.
Oh, jeez. Oh, boy. Actually get past this. Probably not, but one of the things that I think I bought is that if I die, I get brought back to life, which is always nice.
Oh yeah.
I like that the gyro that you get is like in a paper wrap with fries. I think it's hilarious. A little anachronistic there, but
What is this? Something that's going on here?
oh, the health in this is a gyro wrap, and it just the graphic of it is like a. I just picked one up. I don't know if you saw it, but the graphic of it is like
Oh, I
like
see.
something that you would get at a, you know, hole in the wall
Oh,
Euro
a
place.
churro.
Oh, is that what you guys call it?
I don't know. It's spelled with a CH, isn't it?
A GYRO,
Oh, right. Okay.
the lamb meat. And
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, that's also like that's a staple from things like Gauntlet as well, isn't it? Like the health that people drop there are always like cooked meat or
Oh,
something.
that's true. Yeah. Oh. I don't know if you noticed this, but last week in Rad, there was ways that you could cook the raw meat and it would make you healthier. So if you were by like a fire source, it was always a good idea to.
Levi Strauss would have something to say about that.
Whoa!
So this is sort of like a pageant of all the enemy types you've seen so far.
Yeah.
In the boss fight and stuff. It's interesting. I wonder if I could remediate that into my own dungeon
Whoops.
design.
Justified. Oh, but I.
Wow, I really like that area thing with the different circles and stuff. To continue our conversation from last week, where it's like it's one of the aspects that couldn't go into a play-by-turn TTRPG.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yes. The ancient blood. Humans might know what to do with this. What I wouldn't give for, say, a healing flask of some sort.
What's Thomas saying about that? Oh well. It would be nice to have a healing flask. Of course, the run that I say you can play the next one.
Oh no, don't worry about it.
sell.
That time. Lunchzone will give way to lunch pretty soon.
Yep.
What are you having for lunch today?
My standard lunch is bag salad from Target. One of those like salad kits.
What's
that
a
you just-
bag?
What?
Bag.
It's in a bag.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's what us Wisconsinites. I got harassed for the way I said bag and tag.
Now that's
so
what
much.
I'd like to see, an ancient Hellenistic drama where everybody has a Wisconsinite accent.
Oh shit!
Now, that would be interesting.
Yes. Yeah, you don't get the Wisconsin and Midwestern accent too much. Sometimes you do, obviously Fargo, but
But never analogically in fantasy or ancient historical context.
no. Well, of course, accents have their own sort of ontology and
Yeah.
classifications. So, I think when you're building those worlds, you try to think of like what that signifies to people. But it would be funny if you just did it arbitrarily, like just the rulers have a Geordie accent and.
I mean, this is the thing about process, is that I've been thinking about this in D&D as well, is the what exactly has to happen for something to move from the realm of arbitrary to destined.
So yeah, here that was the.
What is that? Was the food? That was the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
gyro.
All right, let's go to the next one. Of course, I'm doing really well in the game that isn't mine. Whoops.
And I find that the thing that something has to do to go from arbitrary to destined is it has to be, like we were saying before, put together. Just through the kind of the jacket zip of practice, where it brings these two things together and whatever.
No. Are you gonna be here next week for the
I'm
next?
actually going to be in Chicago next week
Oh.
for my wife's birthday.
Oh. Is she from Chicago?
No, she's from Scotland, like me.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure. What
No,
are you
but
doing in Chicago?
We've never been to Chicago, so
Oh, okay.
we're going to go stay in a hotel and do a boat tour,
Oh, nice.
go to a jazz club.
Cool.
But no, that's because it's the end of teaching next week, so it's the first time I've had a chance to actually go and journey around America.
Oh, so this is your first year here?
Yeah, I just arrived here in August.
Oh, I didn't know. Cool. All right. Well, it's 12:58, so we got a couple more minutes. Any final thoughts?
Well, I think that this is a game that I would like to play on my own. I would pick it up and play it personally, totally. I like the, it seems like this is in line with the theme of games we've been playing, right? For the Crow game, right?
That's true.
The one last week. These isometric roguelikes.
Well, it also deals with death. That seems to be a
A
fairly.
common staple as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Last week was more like punk polka post-apocalyptic, we're talking about retrofuturism. So, whatever we play next, it should be a continuation of this roguelike arc, or
Well, the thing that I always try, it's hard to pick. I find it's hard to pick games that I potentially enjoy. You don't want to pick a game on stream, I don't think, for these lunch zones that you might enjoy on your own, because. And that includes mostly narrative games, and you certainly don't want to pick a game that.
right? We've spoken about this before.
Yeah, so
The focus on mechanics. in Lunchzone, you know.
Yeah, and so because of that, I have not been. These types of games really work very well.
Because we're taking a sideways glance at them.
Right.
We don't need to see them in a linear sort of thing that grows over time, hours played and stuff.
Yeah.
We just take a sideways glance, a bisection.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and look at the way that the game is put together. Although I think that overstates what we're able to do analytically at this point.
That is cheapest. Hey, how you doing?
Mate. Now, hypothetically, if I provided you with, say, 1,000 coins, would you be willing to give me a ride in your beautiful boat? I had to ask.
Okay. Well, it is now 1 o'clock.
Good.
And I'm gonna have to abort my run here, but
Well, it's been another
Okay.
engaging Lunchzone.
yes, thank you. It's been quite interesting. Sounds like I'll probably won't see you.
Next week.
But you'll be here the following week.
The following week I will be here, yes.
Okay, great. Then we will try to figure something out. I mean, maybe I'll take a break next week. We'll see.
Okay.
But anyway, oh no! Okay, I'm done. Gotta get out of here. There we go. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.